Joining me now is Paulo Von Schirach. He is the president of the Global Policy Institute, an independent research institution. Let's begin with the current economic conditions around the world. Trade war, tariffs, a big issue here at this meeting in Brazil. So how can this bloc of developing nations get on the same page when it comes to navigating what's happening in the world?
Extremely difficult, and quite frankly, some of them are not doing very well. I mean, China is still doing, although at a somewhat slower pace, but it's still a buoyant, growing economy, and so is India, although less than before, but still very significant. Brazil, the host country, is in quite bad shape, and they're trying to figure out ways to avoid a recession. South Africa is mired in internal problems and issues that go from, corruption to power generation issues and whatnot. Russia, still dependent heavily on oil prices and gas, which are somewhat depressed still. So overall, while the brief of the BRICS is to cooperate, to establish frameworks, to exchange information, to establish different ways to work together, they are not as buoyant as they have been in the past. And so it is not quite clear what is an agenda that they can collectively develop and push forward, which can also have an impact, not just on themselves, but on the world economy in general.
And at the same time, they're being entangled with other issues.
Exactly.
Threats of tariffs from the United States, the China-U.S. trade war. In just the last few hours, shifting a bit, the issue of tensions in the Persian Gulf and Iran came up. They're talking about security. And also Venezuela is an issue where they all don't really agree on how to approach. So how can they work through some of these geopolitical issues as well?
Difficult to say. I mean, when the president of Brazil, Bolsonaro, and President Trump met, there seems to be this love fest that, in an ideological sense, they seem to be both, sort of hardline conservatives, law and order. President Trump said that Brazil will be kind of a non-NATO ally of the United States, so there's strong ties and what have you. I guess, I don't know if it's now executive or not, but the president of Brazil indicated his son would be, the next ambassador to Washington, so I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but he nominated him. So very strong ties. On the other hand, clearly, Brazil has to work with the other BRICS countries that may obviously look at all kinds of things, especially pertaining to the United States, completely differently. So it's kind of a tricky situation. And Venezuela is obviously a difficult problem. And right there, even within the BRICS, Brazil is on the side of let Maduro go, along with Washington, whereas, as we know, both China and Russia are favoring a policy of restraint, of non-intervention, and they have a different interests, investments, a lot of credits, money that they're owed by the current regime, so they see all this in a different way. When it comes to the Persian Gulf, one would think that there should be a certain, how can I say, consensus as to the fact that at least all countries involved should want the safeguards for freedom of navigation. After all of them in different ways depend on, well, except for Russia, on oil and gas coming out of the Persian Gulf. China certainly in a major way. So one would think that maybe there is some kind of a common thread there, but it's a bit tricky.
About 30 seconds left. Want to get your take on 5G. We heard that being mentioned as a big topic. And the role of China, as it's currently the leader in 5G. What kind of a role can China play in terms of developing 5G in these BRICS nations, these developing countries? Well,
look, China has a strong presence in many countries, many developing countries. In Africa, is all over the place, and certainly it is quite present in Latin America and elsewhere. But of course, now we know that Huawei has become a political issue and a lightning rod for these controversies between the United States and China. We know what's officially out there. The United States believes that essentially Huawei is an arm of the Chinese state. The Chinese, of course, deny this, and they say, well, this is just a cute way to prevent a fair competition, and America is afraid of losing its dominance in the high-tech field and is creating pretexts to exclude Huawei. It's not quite clear how the other members of the BRICS, certainly Russia, I would say, would not be a problem now, having much closer relations with China. But Brazil and India, who knows?
All right, Paulo Von Schirach, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.